building this dash was a long process, so therefore it produced a long video. I apologize for that, and I figured I'd still leave it as one video, and you could advance past stuff that's not interesting and slow down when you find stuff that is. Hope you enjoy it. So I'm making my own custom dash, and it's pretty different than the stock dash in a couple of ways, gauge layout, so forth. But there's going to be some three-dimensional parts to this dash to give it a little more character, maybe a little bit more like kind of the lines of the car. But this is the first starting point here. I cut a pretty basic piece of cardboard template arrangement, and I'm going to use this as the very first point to start from. I've measured up a certain amount here, centered my gauge location, and my handy dandy compass. I'm gonna trace out the location for my two gauges. Like I mentioned before, this is not going to be a traditional Shelby dash, Cobra dash. This is instead going to be something that, well, is more me, I guess. These little side wings were a bit of a challenge. They had to be at a certain angle, and I had to hold them at that angle and create a nice surface to pull a mold from. So I did an exterior brace, and that's what you're seeing going together here. Ended up working out perfectly. What you didn't see in this video, I did have to go back and forth on that angle a little bit, but I cut out that less exciting stuff to watch. I've closed the Factory 5 manual for a little bit, and I guess, what do they say? I'm kicking it freestyle here. I'm going off script. So this is where I'm going to start fabrication of the custom dash. I'll kind of go right into it here and explain what's going on with it and some of the materials I'm using. So what you're looking at here is not the dash material. This is actually 1/4 inch MDF that I'm using as the form for the fiberglass mold that I'm going to be making. There will be no MDF in the final part for the dash. MDF is probably not the best material to use in a convertible with no roof. So what you're looking at here is actually the back side of the form. So I'll see if I can kind of a little better explanation here. So as you see here, I've got these little wings, and they're glued in via this brace. So the back side of this surface is the surface that I will be laying up fiberglass. Once it's cured, I'll pull that material away, and that'll end up being my basic dash shape. As the kind of pencil marks imply here, it's going to be a very different looking dash, not something that you've seen or likely have seen in a Cobra. But some of those contours, some of those pencil lines, I'm sorry, will actually end up being three-dimensional shapes. The gauges, which are two 5-inch gauges, are the only gauges in the car, and they'll actually be recessed, and these kind of scallop-looking patterns here will also have some dimension to them as well. You know, you can make fun of my makeshift circle jig, but I'm telling you, for small circles like this, it's a lot easier to manage this than it is a full-size router. So a laminate trimmer with a piece of perforated steel. I get unlimited number of hole choices here, so I can vary this by about a 32nd in any direction just by choosing the appropriate hole. So, hey, little tip there for you, but makes perfect circles every time. Got my rough shape cut out here for one of the panels of the dash. Now I'm going to sand to the line. This is a pretty critical shape. Well, it's a very critical shape because this is what all of my other templates and fiberglass forms are going to be based off of. This is one of the plugs for the fiberglass portion of the dash to make pulling the fiberglass easier. I'm going to wrap the exposed edge on this MDF with a little bit of gray duct tape. You can seal this with in other ways, but the problem with this material is it's so porous along this edge that whatever you do involves a lot of filling and sanding, and I'm actually, in this case, not all that concerned with the finish, what the actual finish will be. My goal here is to just make sure that the fiberglass releases, and this will make more sense when I put this in place, and I'll show you what that looks like. But let me just trim this edge flush. Here's the reverse side of the dash. You can see the plugs that I just put in, the ones where the edge is all wrapped in gray duct tape. Gray duct tape seems to be the right mixture of stickiness and slipperiness. So the fiberglass I've in the past I've found has really slid right off of it. And the nice thing too is that the fiberglass does bite into it, the resin does bite into it. The gray duct tape will actually release from the part. So it seems to work pretty well on all counts. So next step is to fill a few of the small gaps, and then I'm going to start laying some fiberglass. Well, I'm getting ready to lay the fiberglass. I've been waxing this over and over again. You can never have too much wax.
One of my biggest concerns in laying this fiberglass, laying the first couple layers of mat, was to make sure that I was going to get a good bond and a good fill around those two center circles, basically the parts that receive the gauges, going round and around those parts. But I've said it before, there ain't nothing sexy about doing fiberglass work. It smells, it itches, it sticks to everything. And as you'll see, my scissors get consistently furrier and furrier as the project progresses.
Well, after a little prying and pushing, I've almost got this thing released. Looks like it's going to pop off. Couple little... Ha ha ha! Took what, 10 screwdrivers as wedges. Finally got the thing off, so it certainly looks ugly from this side. I'm not concerned about this. Some of the backs of these actually, obviously the gauge section, this area gets cut off, so I'm not all that concerned. But and then there's a witness line you can't really see here. Hopefully you can see it on the other side. I'm delaying turning this over, by the way, if you haven't figured that out yet, because I'm a little nervous to see how it looks on the other side. I'm a little concerned. Oh, I want to peek. I'm a little concerned that the fiberglass didn't find its way into the tight radius here in between these gaps. Here was a little. It fought me, as you saw when I was putting the fiberglass in. It fought me a little bit. I didn't use a gel coat on this. I didn't need it because this is going to be a vinyl coated surface. But let's see. Certainly ugly from this side. Let's see how it looks from the other. Oh, hey. It worked. You know, I'm not concerned about these areas here. That's never seen. This area actually gets cut out. Or part of it does. Hey, the detail looks good. I've got a nice clean line to trim the edge with. That'll work out well. It's plenty strong enough and fairly light. But hey, worked. All the corners and edges got filled in nicely. So, yeah, kind of give you an idea here, but gauges will sit flush in here. And then I got these plugs that snap into here. That will be a different finish.
I could have.
Well, let's do the first test fit in the fiberglass dash. I don't suspect there'd be any problems, but nice to see what it looks like in place. Obviously very roughly sanded. And you'll see something like that. Well, that looks pretty nice. I would call that a win. So another part of the dash includes this radiused part that finishes off the bottom. So I didn't want this hard edge at the bottom of the dash. Kind of bring this into frame here a little bit. I guess I don't like this hard edge here. Let's try it like this so you can see it. I want to soften this edge. Again, add some dimension to this dash part here. So I'm going to use this piece of thin wall plastic tubing as a form to pull a piece of fiberglass from, and that will be make up the bottom part of the dash, that rolled edge in the bottom part. So to cut, I need to cut this in half. So in order to cut it in half and to do it safely, well, as safely as it can go, cutting unusual shapes on table saws is always a dicey moment. But I glued screwed a straight edge to it. It'll give me enough to get it through here, but even so, this is not a fun thing to cut. I'm not sure I'd recommend this to anybody else. I've got enough experience to know that this could go terribly wrong. So let's hope I don't catch terribly wrong in this video. So I went ahead and finished up making this form. I intended on recording some of it, but forgot to hit record. But basically, like you saw, I cut this piece of thin wall PVC in half. Cut this angle. You can see it. Looks like hell now, but this is a little brace just to sure up this angle. But not too critical about this joint here. There's going to be a lot of post fabricating or post fiberglass work, so I don't mind having a little bit of wrinkle here. But essentially this fits over the dash like this. So you can see now kind of the idea behind this mold. It's going to sit like this, and this gives me that return that goes up under the side of the dash. Here's a little cup here. This will give me an indentation. You'll see it better when it's in the actual piece. Right now we're looking at the negative, so it's a little hard to kind of wrap your head around it. But when the fiberglass is pulled, this will be a little indentation for switches. So again, it sits like this, and now I'm gonna start laying more fiberglass. Fun, fun. Well, here we go, and yet another moment of truth. We're gonna see if my form worked. There's a little bit of a negative draft angle on this one part. I knew it'd be a little tricky to get it to release, but I'm also banking on this stuff being flexible enough. See, I've made some pretty good progress. Let me add a little more light to this. Might help. No light. Okay. So I pulled these out of the mold a few days ago, and everything went great. You know, just to kind of recap here, the center section here where the gauges go, these get knocked out, obviously, so the gauges drop in. They're pretty deep. I added a little glass filler along this seam, this edge here, just to make it easier to cut out. It was a little thin, and when you cut thin fiberglass, especially when you're using a router bit, which is what I'll do, it gets a little jumpy. So a little extra meat there seems to help out quite a bit. These sections, doesn't matter. This actually is a recess that holds an additional panel, so I don't care about the finish and surface back in there. A couple things. This edge, the only exposed edge is what you see here, this surface here. So what's going to be important is that I get this radius really clean, and I'm shooting for a 1/16 inch radius all the way around this edge. And that'll give me a nice transition point between the panel that goes in here and then the vinyl that's covering this surface. You need a little bit of a radius there. It makes the joint look intentional. You know, it makes the seam look intentional. Adding a nice reveal to it. So why did I make this a separate piece? Why did I just form this into this? Why didn't I make a mold that had this as part of the contour? The simple answer is that this type of profile transition from here to here is a really difficult profile to upholster. I've done it before. It's a lot of work. Usually involves relying a bit too much on adhesive, or you could sew that seam, and I contemplated that, but the truth is I don't want that seam to be too obvious. So by making this a separate piece, it allows me to finish this or upholster this separately, and then this piece screws onto this, which will already be upholstered. So in the end, it's going to give me a really nice clean transition. And again, like up here, I'm going to do a nice kind of gentle radius on this part. And again, make that transition, draw a little attention to that transition, and make it look intentional by showing a nice reveal. So I've been struggling with this transition here. as you can tell, I'm kind of in the process of filling and sanding and getting this ready for vinyl. But I've been struggling with this transition here. This is going to be upholstered, this round section here, and you can't just end upholstery at a seam like this. I mean, your option would be to sew and insert in, but the likelihood of actually getting that stitching to be absolutely perfect is beyond me. So I decided to make a small little metal cup. Again, this is to house switches. I haven't sanded it to shape yet, really. This is just kind of roughly tacked together. But this is going to sit in here like this. If you can see that better. So your view driving is going to be something like that, I guess. The switches are easily accessed below. But more importantly, what this does is it creates that clean transition between the upholstery, which is in this case a vinyl, where it can wrap and tuck into this recess, and then this cup screws into place via 2 screws up underneath. Okay, so let me explain a little bit what I'm doing here. You saw this when I did these 2 pieces, but I'll explain kind of why I do it in this sequence. This vinyl takes a set pretty well. In other words, you can preheat it, push the particular shape into place that's going to be nesting into it, hold it for a second, press it in. When it cools, you pull it out. You have a nice kind of indentation where the detail is. So my process is this: I heat it up, insert the trim ring for the bezel for the gauge, I let it cool for a second, take it out, and kind of repeat that a few times. And eventually you can draw this center section in. And then after you've got a clear kind of delineation of where this opening is, then take a razor blade, you can slice out the opening, which then allows the material to stretch even further. So that's kind of the process. That's why I'm doing it this way. And so we're going to start with heating this up. So it has been pointed out to me that I'm wearing the exact same outfit every time I'm in the garage. Normally these things go unnoticed, but because it's on film, on camera, people are noticing. I do have other clothes. These are what I throw on to work in the garage, whatever. But I'm not here to talk about this. I have completed the dash to a point where it's ready to install. I know it's way ahead of really where I am in the build. But waiting on some parts, it just makes sense for me to kind of keep myself busy and do some of these more custom things. But I think I've mentioned in the past, there's like 3, maybe 4 kind of major departures from a standard Factory 5 build. One was the roll bar, you saw that. 2 is the dash, which you're about to see. You've seen me working on it, putting things together. You have a pretty good sense for what it's going to look like. But I have most of the materials in place on it. It is not, the parts in the metal parts in the dash are not painted. They won't be painted until I paint the car as a whole. So because they are going to be matched to the color of the car. So what you're going to be looking at right now is, for the most part, the upholstery done and things roughly held in place. It's a really good indication of how this dash is going to look. Vinyl's a bit different than what you're used to seeing. I love it, and you know, in my head I've got the kind of the grand picture of things, of how this car is going to look in its end. And so far, this vinyl is kind of how I envision this car looking. So at least the interior, obviously, looking. So let's take a look at what we've got. This is the dash, how it sits. Like I said, it's done, with the exception of some painting that has to happen on the metalwork. A little bit of sanding on the metalwork as well. It's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but there's a few imperfections from where I was hammering on this stuff. You can see if I get a little closer here. I love these gauges. These are, boy, I just lost Dakota. They're a Dakota digital gauge. They're 5-inch gauges. Everything I need in both those 2 gauges. All the information is right there. I got my little section here for some switches. I only have 3 switches. Anything else that I need is going to be tucked up underneath. I'll note this as well. This is not perfect. It's really hard getting metal to form in that direction. This perf stuff, it stretches the perf really bad. So this I'm not actually concerned about anyways, because there's a bezel piece that goes around here that finishes off the way the steering wheel, the steering shaft, that the thing that connects the steering wheel to the wheels goes through right there. I have a bezel that kind of cleans that up. And so the gauges, you kind of saw up to this point, I put a lot of work into getting them to be flush. I didn't want them sitting proud on that panel. I didn't want them to look like they were just kind of punched through and sitting on top of the panel. So I recessed it, and that was a big part of why I ended up making this whole thing out of fiberglass. It gave me the ability to build in contour to receive things like this. The metal's, perforated metal's it's sitting about where it's going to sit. The idea was for it to be a little bit proud of this surface. Again, I wanted to add some dimension to this. It might draw in a little bit further when I'm done tightening it up, but these bolt in from the back. There's these little tabs that kind of go back through, and they draw the whole thing together. Really happy with it. And this is about where I'm going to end this video now. I'm getting ready to wrap this thing up and put it in plastic and stick it upstairs, and wait for the next point when I'm going to need it, which is when I'm painting the car. I also just wanted to do a quick shout out to those who have dropped some nice comments. I've, I'm learning as I'm going along here, and I've gotten some good information. So I just wanted to thank you guys for that. It's been great. It's been a great experience on this end. So with that being said, hope everybody has a great week, and stay tuned for the next video.